Counts and censuses, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but there are potential sources already out there that can be kind of harnessed. Unfortunately, a lot of the wind consultant operated stuff, even though it's federally funded, that data is not available to anybody because they won't release it. That's something that needs to be changed. When permits are issued, that data needs to be in the public realm. Agency projects, local surveys done by local groups. There's a lot of different types of surveys going on out there. There's a lot of different ways of doing surveys. And there's pros and cons in different census techniques as well. I'll give what my feeling is and what should be the primary one that we're working on migration, a couple reasons why. But that's a little more of a tougher nut to crack. But there is a lot of potential out there. There's a workforce potentially available to start building on something like this. And there's a lot of organized potential that can be brought in as partners, because no one entity can do this alone. You've got to be looking at partnerships, bringing in different organized groups, and then working down to individuals to really get a monitoring protocol or monitoring system going, which is different than a monitoring protocol. So, to the proposed protocol that we've been putting forward for Midwest Landbird Migration Monitoring Network. The strategies of it is to overcome some of the limitations that we've had over the years, with basically nobody talks to each other. Utilizing opportunities. Who is doing work already out there? Can they be brought in? If their systems don't fit the protocol, how much does it get them into fitting that protocol? And have a protocol that's extremely flexible, that multiple questions at multiple scales can utilize. So the protocol is basically, it's based off of those four methodologies that are out there. Level one would be what I call a master banding station. That is a station that's run every day during migration. And this is really the hub of the whole system for the Great Lakes. You need these spaced around. Possibly one on Lake Superior is all that's needed. It needs to be running every day. It's daily operations. Every station is not only doing the banding and all the reports of what goes with that, they also conduct point counts and they conduct a daily list, which is strictly presence absence. So there's 3 layers of data done by this station. The second is the periodic banding station. They're the ones that do not have the personnel, the funding to do every day, but they can be out there consistently in some form or manner. They also, when they're there, are doing point counts and keeping the list, just like they would be doing the daily. The third is where you don't have the expertise or personnel to do a banding station, but you have somebody that can get out and do point counts. They do the point counts and the list, just like the banding stations are doing. The data is collected the same way, but at different levels. What your individual question may be is how many of these that you need. That gets into the sample design of your question. The protocol is separate. It's gathering data the same way. And as has already been shown here, the importance of radar and acoustics and other methodologies that can be brought in here. Where possible, radar is not possible, not in today's world, but having radar involved, putting that radar in conjunction with one of these stations is much more better than sticking it out on its own somewhere else, because now it's comparable to another set of data. And radar is can answer some questions that none of these other methods can, and it can make these other methods more valuable. Because we can go out and band 500 birds today and 20 birds the next day, but what does that mean to the population of birds that are coming through or at risk? Radar can help give us that answer. Acoustics, there's some real problems with that, just because I feel with the call rates, we don't know if they consistently call at the same rate, but brought in with these other methods, it now brings another method that can be brought into that modeling exercise. Because some of these birds call that we don't catch, and they're using the habitat difference. So, some of the components of the protocol, there's definite minimum standardization. Every bird banded has a timestamp. as does the point count, and as the list, which is more the daily thing. Mass is taken. Fat levels, standardized to Helms and Drury. This is 1960. Value of Helms and Drury, it's a 0 to 6 point scale that you can go have, which for all intents and purposes gives you continuous variable, which you can analyze. Most of the other fat classing is done on a 0 to 3, which makes it very hard. It's a discrete variable, very hard to analyze. It's done more used in breeding bird surveys, and we're not talking about a physiologically same bird as a breeding bird. Migration is totally different. Fat means different things to them. So having a fat classing that can be analyzed is very important. It's easy to switch to that because you just do what you have been doing and Helms and Drury at the same time for a year. You now have the ability to then go back and do corrections. Methodology, multiple levels. No one method is going to get you any of the questions you really want. And running, the dates. I recommend at least 75% of the migration season should be covered in any study. Banning, all aspects of capture, data collection, standardization, very important. But that timestamp on the individual bird is what really allows you to take, okay, this station ran from sunrise to noon, this one from sunrise to 6, well, I can pull out that piece of data. It's comparable in those two stations. Lots of information to be taken that cannot be got any other way than by banding. You have that bird in hand. It's not only a Magnolia warbler, but it's an after second year male. It weighs this, it has this kind of fat classing. You have a lot of individual information about that data. It can tell you things about your area. Energetic conditions extremely important. Recapture the birds. You catch a bird today, you catch it 3 days later. What the weight do? Up, down. What is the fat conditions doing? It tells you something about your habitat. And it was interesting. The islands mentioned off of Maine. Those birds aren't staying there. We see that along the coast. Our primary station, which is the largest remaining beach ridge left on Lake Erie, is 4 times bigger than any of the other ridges that are left. It's the most endangered habitat in the state. We get a lot of holdover of birds. You take one of the smaller ridges, which you're talking 100 yards, maybe all the bigger it is, they catch the birds there, but we don't see them again. But we're catching them then on the main ridge. So they're gravitating to a more consistent habitat. There's a lot going on out there, but just looking through binoculars, you can't answer. Getting that energetic condition tells us something about our habitat, and do we have adequate, or are we doing a good job? So a lot of metrics, age, getting molt information, what are going on in the birds, what is the age ratios that's going on. As I mentioned, hatching your birds going to the coast, there's some things going on there on species across the whole thing. It's interesting, your blackpoll, is of interest on the East Coast too. We probably are the center of blackpoll migration in the world, in the western basin of Lake Erie. Think of a bird of primary nesting, really very high boreal forest, Alaska. And 2 years ago, we caught 6 blackpolls that we had banded in previous years in the fall. So they were homing back to the exact same spot. 6. I'd only had one known migratory bird be recaptured in a later season out of 300,000 birds. We get 6 in 1 year. We had 2 last year. So that's saying there's some real site fidelity to migration stopover sites. To these birds. One was 5 years after the original banding date to the day. On a net within 200 yards where it was 5 years before. There's definitely some site fidelity there. It's extremely important in the Great Lakes region. There's lots of auxiliary marking. You've heard some about some telemetry work and like that. Now that the technology is getting down, it's useful in these kind of birds. It just opens up lots of other questions that can be worked on at the same time. Color marking is still always a possibility. Not a whole lot of value in migratory work, but it is other options out there. But there's definitely auxiliary marking things that can be brought into the picture as well. Point counts. We're recommending point counts over transects. because there's some real problems in migration counts that are not part of breeding bird counts. Birds are in migration throughout the day. We can see that in our net systems, which are along the beach ridge, that you get this assemblage of species caught in this set of nets. The next round, that same assemblage is here. Next round, that same assemblage is there. They are migrating. They are moving. If they are moving and you are moving, if you're moving in opposite directions, you're getting a very different count than if you move the same way they're moving. So the point count is what in that time frame goes by in that thing. So, transects are great in grasslands. We've got some concerns about them in any other habitats. Point counts, I think, are much more standard, especially for migration. But the detectability is a real problem. We'll have on our point counts, we'll get a lot of warblers on our point counts, get very few thrushes. The number one bird we're banning is thrushes. Migration, they're calling different, very different. So that's a major problem with point counts. Some estimates are that on surveys, 50% of birds aren't counted, but they're present. So there's a major detectability problem. We're working on trying to get at, because the other problem in migration is different than breeding, is your detectability on April 15th and June 1st are not the same, because vegetation has had major changes, which doesn't occur during summer. We're trying to come up how do we deal with that change in detectability capabilities. And we're doing some vegetation weekly around the points to, again, go into a modeling thing and say, okay, you can't see that bird, it's not singing or calling 10 yards away, then on April 15th you could. So that it creates a whole other problem of migration will stop. And working with Gary White and some of his crew out of Power Strait trying to get through some of these major problems that are really occurring for migrational analysis. The daily bird list, it's strictly a presence-absence. It could be 1, it could be 10,000. What we're finding is that it really helps on rare species. You may not got on your point count, you may not have caught it, but it was there. And over time, then you start getting the outside bounds of migrations of the species we don't get large sample sizes. So it has, and it's easy to do across all places. And then we have radar and acoustics. Radar has amazing capabilities in getting at some of the questions, because it's useful when you can't see the birds. Acoustics, there's some really interesting things going on with that too, that I think has some real value to us. A major study we started a couple years ago, Migratory brought together a assemblage of groups, OSU, BGSU, University of Toledo, USGS, Fish and Wildlife Service, Ohio Department, and Old Bird, which is Bill Evans, all working together, bringing all these methods to the same spot. Two major questions we were getting at. One was risk. What is the elevation of these birds coming in a major migration stopover? Do they come in, hit the lake edge, dropped in, or are they like a jet coming in for quite a few miles? No one knows. So we wanted to look at that. At the same time, we also wanted to put some meaning to the banding and point count data that we got. What is that volume of birds coming through, and under atmospheric differences, does 100 birds caught one day and 100 birds the next day mean the same thing? What was the amount of birds that coming through? That's what radar hopefully can get at it for us. So we used the banding data, the banding station we had, our master station, that's run daily right on the lake edge. We also have other stations 15 miles inland on a small creek corridor that we were able to utilize. BSBO was put into it. Ohio State University took the lead on point counts. They set up a massive point count program to work it from the lake shore to 15 miles inland to see how things changed on point counts. These are things that were happening during the day. Again, what's that have to do with populations? We really don't know. USGS came in with multiple radar units. I'm not sure there's ever been multiple radar units in one place before. And they were putting them on the lake edge, at 3 miles inland, and at 15 miles inland. At the banding stations. I mean, it is setting within 100 yards of the banding station in both of those sites. The idea is to get at making the banding data more valuable, and also to get this, how these things come in. And they're still working on actually analyzing, as Nathan knows, it's a monster getting at. But some real shocking, they've been shocked by the amount of bird numbers they're picking up 15 miles inland under 500 feet. These birds are already dropping down, coming in. And also the amount of birds that follow lakeshore at night, not crossing. So there's a lot of things going on there. Acoustics, very interesting. Bill Evans has the one mounted at the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. Totally different group of bird calls they're getting from what we're banning. They're using the habitats. Lots of sparrows. We see a few sparrows on the lakefront. You go inland 15 miles and that's what we're catching, the sparrows. It's opened up our view of what's really important to these birds. Finally, this is kind of leading into Katie's talk, but you need a place to get this data all in one place. The Midwest Avian Data Center is really the place. We're working on getting our data sets right around 300,000 banding records, and I'm not sure how many point count records is going in. In that, we need this repository. So I think probably we put questions to later.
Yes, during lunch, unfortunately. Thank you.